You're working in a company, and the company is a manufacturing company, and it has a good image. And in general, there's a really good image of the products and the brands that the company makes. And then suddenly one day there's a problem, and the production line breaks down, and there's a big explosion, and a lot of damage is done. And the company is not very open about what's happened. There's a lot of problems with customers and suppliers. The public at large begins to hear the story, and people begin to get a negative image of the company. Now, this is all to do with corporate image. And in this video, I'd like to talk about what corporate image is. I'd like to talk about the factors that change corporate image and how a company can actively work on its corporate image. And then we're going to talk about the example that I just gave you, which is what does a company do when there's a crisis, and how can it use a crisis in order to not make its image worse or even maybe to improve its corporate image. This is crisis management. But before we talk about those things, let's have a look at some vocabulary. Now, the first piece of vocabulary I'd like to look at is the noun perception, and the verb is to perceive. And when we talk about corporate image, these are important words, because to perceive means to come to realize, to understand, to consider, to regard. And corporate image is all about the way that people, different groups of people, how they perceive a company, its products or its brands. It's all to do with perception. And one of the things that can change perception is, of course, environmental sustainability. And sustainability, the adjective is sustainable. The opposite is unsustainable, or sometimes we say non-sustainable. And environmental sustainability is about the ability to maintain a balance in the environment and about keeping and conserving natural resources and to support the well-being of younger generations and future generations. Philanthropy is about giving money to people who need it, basically. That you can give, companies can give donations, or sometimes companies, for example, they have their own foundation which gives money or donations, or it helps certain organizations. Then we've got competitive positioning, and competitive positioning is how a company positions itself relative to competitors and how it differentiates itself in the market. And then when we come to crisis management, we need to talk about mitigation. Now, mitigation is the noun, the verb is to mitigate. And if I say to mitigate, this is to make something less serious. So mitigation it's all about those actions that are taken in order to stop a crisis being really bad, or it reduces the effects of a crisis or the impact of a crisis. Mitigation. My next word is preparedness. Now, preparedness, you probably already know the verb to prepare, or the adjective to be prepared. The noun is probably not used as widely, and you might not be as aware of it, but it's really the noun preparedness, about the state of being ready to respond effectively. In this case, we're going to talk about responding effectively to a crisis. Now, one of the steps in mitigation that we can take is evacuation. So in the example that I just had with the explosion, maybe one of the things that the company will need to do is evacuation. And they will need to move people from somewhere that's dangerous to a location that's safer. And they need to do this in an organised and in a controlled way. Now, in my example as well, one of the things the company didn't do was talk to the media. And talking to the media and having relationships with the media is all about media relations and about having good media relations and using that and having interaction with the media. Resilience is about being able to stand against something, to withstand something and to recover something. So, for example, he had a very bad car accident, but his resilience helped him to recover in a really good way. And companies need to show resilience. They need to show the ability to withstand and recover from crises in an effective way. We've also got contingency planning, and contingency planning is basically it's plan B. So if something doesn't work the first time, you have some kind of response to something, then it's having plans that are alternative courses of action that you can put into action if your first plan doesn't work. So what is corporate image? Well, corporate image is all about this perception, and it's the way that we all see or we all regard different brands. And this can be a very personal thing. So for example, if I take the brand Apple and I see the brand Apple and I see the image of the apple, then I might think of words like market leader, innovative, well-designed, upmarket. Now these are the words that I think of. And if we were to ask 20 other people about their image of Apple, it's very possible that they would use exactly the same words as me because of the way the company has its positioning and the way it uses its marketing and its advertising. But it's also possible because of experiences that people have had with the brand. It could be that people have very different perceptions to me and people use very different words. So that's the first thing. Image can be very personal. Now, if we take 3 very well-known brands, maybe just think about what are your 4 or 5 words when you see these brands? What's your perception of these brands? And first of all, I've got Mercedes. Then I've got McDonald's. And then I've got Coca-Cola. Maybe you want to ask 2 or 3 other people for their perceptions and see if you have the same perceptions or you have different perceptions. So there are different, as we've already mentioned, there are different things that influence the image that we have of certain brands. Now we've had, for example, there's public relations. Now a very well-known international company that I work for, I can remember they had a really extensive corporate communications department and it was very well developed, and they had a number of journalists working for them, and they had people who were working on PR all the time. And basically what we can say is that the function of this PR was to take potentially negative things or negative stories about the company, things that maybe happened internally or things that were said on blogs on the internet or things that were written in newspapers, and take these stories and try and change them from a negative thing into something that's much more positive. And working on your PR, so all the time it's giving a positive image of your company. And connected to this as well, marketing and advertising can really affect your perception of certain brands. At the moment, for example, in the United Kingdom, we have all the Christmas advertising. Now, some of the Christmas advertising, I really like it. I think it's really clever. I think it's very intelligent. I think it's very creative. And it gives me a really good impression of the brands that are being advertising. But there's other advertising, and I don't really like the advertising. The advertising seems to be cliche. It seems to be using stereotypes. It seems to be not very original. They seem to be saying something that they've said in previous years, and I'm really bored with the message. Now, this is the way that marketing and advertising can affect my perception of the brand. When we talked about Apple, we talked about the competitive positioning of Apple. Now, Apple has a very strong competitive positioning in the way that it markets and it sells its products, and the way that its products are designed and its stores are designed. And this competitive positioning helps to give me a perception of the Apple brand. It can be the policies of the company. So we talked about things like if the company has really good environmental policies and they're interested in environmental sustainability, or they do things in my community, or they have a foundation or they do a lot of philanthropy. And another thing that can really affect your image is your own experience of a brand. And this can change from one day to the next. Now, an example I can give here is I always bought, a couple of years ago, I always bought my electrical products and little household products I needed around the home. There was always one store that I went to, and my image was quite positive for that store. But then I ordered one product, and when the product was delivered, it wasn't the product that I'd ordered, and it wasn't set up in the way that I wanted the product. And when I complained about that and I tried to get it changed, then I found it very difficult to work with the customer service of that company. And that one experience changed my positive image, or my positive perception, into a negative perception. And this is one of the aspects of corporate image. It's very fluid. It's something that can change from one day to the next. And one action or one event can change this image. But one of the aspects of corporate image is that it is fluid, and companies can undertake actions in order to change their image. So if you want to talk about this, then you might want to give an example. And one of the examples we could give of this is of a fast food restaurant. Now, a fast food restaurant might have a negative image for different reasons. It could be to do with the food. It could be the fast food the restaurant has a reputation for using low quality ingredients. It uses meat from factory farming. It uses ingredients that are full of additives, or the food has a lot of fats and a lot of sugars, and the food is generally considered to be unhealthy. Maybe as well, the company uses packaging that is not very sustainable, environmentally sustainable, and it takes a long time to break these materials down, and they cause a lot of waste around our towns and in our communities. Maybe as well, as the company has a reputation for not being a good employer. Maybe there's a lot of mistreatment of workers, abuse, harassment maybe, or maybe simply the employees are not paid very well. Maybe the restaurants are now a little bit old-fashioned and they don't have a very clean and a very fresh image. So all of these items could create a negative corporate image, but the company can take actions in order to change this image. And again, this is to do with this fluid nature of the corporate image. So if we take the fast food restaurant, for example, the first thing you could do is talk about changing the food. You could change the menu. We could source ingredients which are much higher quality. Maybe you want to source organic products, for example. Or maybe on the restaurant, on the menu, you could put in items that are considered much more healthy. Things like salads and fruits and yogurts and so on. If you're using packaging, maybe you could get rid of packaging completely and use some other way of delivering your products. Or maybe you could try and go out and find packaging that is much more sustainable and better for the environment. Then you could work with your employees, try and pay maybe better wages, and also introduce maybe some kind of works council in your restaurants, so that employees can voice any problems that they've got in the company, and you can deal with those problems. Another thing you might do is to work on your marketing and your advertising. Maybe you want to make the restaurant a little bit more modern, make it cleaner, and give the whole thing a fresher and a brighter image to do with these healthier food options. And you want to express that in your marketing and your advertising. But things are not always in the company's control. And one of the things that can happen to a company is a crisis. And crisis can be something that's internal. Well, maybe it's some kind of scandal involving one of your employees. Maybe somebody's stolen some money. Maybe there's some kind of financial scandal going on in the company. Maybe something has gone wrong on the production line, and somebody has planned something wrong or developed something and it's in an incorrect way, and you have to recall the product. But there are many crises which are really outside of your control, and they can happen really from one day to the next. Maybe it's a natural disaster. Maybe an earthquake has happened in the country of where you've got your biggest customer. Maybe we could look at the example recently of the worldwide pandemic. Maybe an attack has come on your company from the outside. Maybe there's some kind of hacking, or there's some kind of cyber attack on your company. Maybe people have tried to sabotage or tamper with your products in some way. And again, if you Google this and you have a look around on the internet, you'll see there are many, many, many different kinds of crises. So the question, I think, for a company is not, well, will a crisis happen? But the question is much more about how will you handle the crisis when it does happen? And this is to do with corporate image, because the way that a company handles a crisis, its crisis management, it can make the image worse. It can maintain the image, keep the image that it already has, or it can even help to improve or enhance the image. So let's talk about crisis management. And the first step is all about being prepared. So not just letting a crisis happen, but having something in place and having some kind of preparation that is ready for when a crisis does hit. So one of the things you can do is put together a crisis management team. And this is a team that is put together, and they will prepare for different crises. They'll begin to evaluate the possibilities for different kinds of crises, and they'll begin to make different kinds of plans for crises that can happen to the company. And different people in the crisis management team will probably be given different roles within the team. For example, one of the people you might have is a spokesperson. And the spokesperson will be the person who uses those media relations and goes out and talks to the media and talks to the general public and to different stakeholders. It's about putting together this plan and having a plan that can be put into action if a crisis does hit. And of course, it's all about having this plan and also training. It's all about communication. It's about discussion, it's about training, and it's education, and it's about training and knowing what happens if a crisis does happen. So the next step is about response. And the first thing about response is that if you have crisis management and you have a crisis management team and they've planned and they've trained for a crisis, the first thing that will happen is they can quickly react to the crisis. They'll recognise when the crisis is happening, and they'll be able to react to it quickly, and they'll be able to take the initial steps that need to be taken. And then the crisis management then is really all about putting the plan into action and taking all those steps that need to be taken in order to mitigate the crisis. So you want to make any damages, any possible damages, less severe than they might have been. It's all about, as well, crisis management is really about communication. And it's about communicating with different stakeholders. So the public at large, the community, your employees, your customers, suppliers, the media, and it's communicating people in the best way possible. So this would be in a very transparent way, a very open way, honest, truthful. You want to be empathetic with people, and you really want to be seen as if you're not really hiding something, but you're trying to react to something in the best way that you possibly can. You might need as well to communicate with emergency services, as we saw with our explosion. You might need to talk to the police, or you might need to deal with the fire brigade or something like this. As the crisis develops as well, maybe things change. Maybe you need to put into place then your contingency plans, your plan Bs, And one of the things that the practice and the education and the training will do is for you to be able to be flexible and to adapt and respond when something's not working, and then put something else into action. And then when the crisis has been dealt with, then we'll be coming on then to recovery and looking at the long-term recovery of the crisis, after the crisis. So this could be repairing damage or something like this. And then it will be about assessing and documenting what went on in the crisis, and using that assessment and documentation to evaluate what went on and to learn from what went on. And if you do this, then the crisis team can evaluate what went well, what went so-so, what went badly, and then assess what should be done the next time a crisis might hit. And this will really help the next crisis management team that comes along and has to deal with a crisis. So the way that you handle this crisis, if you do it in the best way possible, you can even enhance your corporate image. And we can say that effective crisis management is all about helping organizations mitigate damage, maintain trust, and come out of crises, some emerge from crises stronger and more resilient and with a better corporate image than they had before. It's a critical aspect of modern organization and business planning. So that was crisis management. If you want to learn more about crisis management, then I would simply Google crisis management. You'll find lots of examples of companies that handled crises in a good way and companies that handled crises in a negative way. And if you want to learn more, then I would analyse 2 or 3 companies that handled something well and analyse why they did it well and what the results of their management were. And I would also look at companies, 2 or 3 companies that handled things in a more negative way, and analyse why things were done badly and what they could have done maybe in order to improve their crisis management. So that's all I wanted to say in this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.